As AI tools and technology continues behaving more and more like humans, it's only logical to wonder whether AI might make a good friend. But is having an AI friend really a good idea? I'm Christopher Lind, and professionally, I'm a tech analyst, industry advisor, and HR executive. Outside of work, I'm a husband and father of seven. But wherever you run into me, you'll find me helping people stay future focused as I live life at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. And today, I'm going to be talking about whether or not AI might make a good friend. Now, I'm not sure what brought you to this video. I've actually been anticipating the moment where this would come as I've been following the trends of what's been going on with technology. And I think we're at the right time to tackle the question because that time has now arrived. And I've been talking with people from all over the digital spectrum, and I recognize there's a lot of different points of view on this. There are some people who are in absolute shock and disbelief. There's no way an AI friend that sounds like science fiction, all the way over to people who are complete advocates that we should have nothing but AI friends in our life. And who needs people when we have AI? And I've seen all those extremes and everything in the middle. As with many things, I think you'll find my point of view on this to land somewhere in the middle, depending on the situation. So, my goal with this video is to help you think critically about the possibilities and to understand the technology while at the same time being keenly aware of the risks because they're real. Now, you might be thinking, why now? You said that the time is now, it's the right moment for this. This was actually sparked by some recent things I've been following with what OpenAI is doing. And if you haven't seen, OpenAI recently released that ChatGPT can now see, hear, and speak. Now, this isn't new. While OpenAI is releasing it, this isn't new, but this is all starting to hit the mainstream extremely quickly. And we're going to start seeing AI capability that can see, hear, and think popping up everywhere. In fact, a lot of this is already largely everywhere, but in pockets. But now we're going to start to see this come together. This is largely due to generative AI's maturity in its language, understanding, its voice creation capability, and now, as you look at what it can do from a graphical standpoint, its ability to create humanistic characters that we're reaching a point where it can create a relatively convincing human interaction and a human companion potentially. So, like I said, just because it can, does that mean it's a good thing? But we're reaching a point of maturity where it can actually do this really well. And there are a lot of people today who are being fooled by AI in interactions. They're hearing an AI voice, not realizing it's an AI voice. They're engaging in a conversation with AI, not realizing it's AI. So, skeptics, if you're out there being skeptical, be warned. This isn't going anywhere. This is an inevitability, and it's only going to continue maturing. So even some of the bumps and hiccups that we see in that today, they are quickly shrinking, quickly disappearing, and being able to have a human experience with AI is closing. The gap is closing. Now, this raises the question, just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should. However, the simple question of should I have an AI friend is not really all that simple in my mind. I don't think it's really all that simple, and I'm going to talk about why that is. Now, I think the first thing, and why I say this, is we first have to answer the question, well, what do we mean when we say friend? That may sound like a really simple thing. Oh, is this your friend? But it's not. The word friend gets thrown around a lot, and it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone in every situation. You might refer to some random person that you've heard of as my friend, the same way you would refer to someone who you have a 20-year deep-seated interpersonal relationship with. You might call them both friends. And so someone saying, this is my friend, doesn't necessarily give you all the clarity on what that really means. Now, When I think about friends and what a friend is, I actually visualize this on a business matrix, which maybe that's not where your head goes, but it's where my head goes with this. So I'm actually going to pull this up just to give you an idea of what's going on in my head here when I see this. So let me bring this into pan. And I get the text is small, so this may be a little difficult to see. But if you're looking at this, I'm looking at this on this T intersection, not in the four quadrants, but I'm actually not necessarily looking at this going, well, AI friend versus human friend. I'm just saying, okay, friend in general, I look at this and I say on the Y axis, there is emotional needs that friend can meet. And then there are very transactional needs. You may have that friend that you call, I just need you to help me move a dresser. Are they really your friend? Are they meeting emotional needs for you? Or are they just the person you call because they have a lifting kit in their house and they can help pick up heavy furniture on a more transactional level? So that's what you're seeing in the X or the Y axis there from top to bottom. Where does that fall on that spectrum? And then the other one is moving along the X axis is risk. And we look at this and we say, okay, so what is the nature of the relationship? Is it emotional? Is it transactional? And then where does it fall on the risk spectrum? And you may not, I actually would say people will be in different parts of this quadrant for different reasons. Now, what I drew on here was some colors. And like I said, this looks like something my kids would put together. And that's just because, well, I colored it on my iPad. But if you look at what I've put up here, instead of just saying holistically, where would this person sit or where would AI sit? I think we actually have to deconstruct that and say, okay, let's take friend apart. Let's deconstruct friend and let's look at the activities that we may ask of a friend and determine where they would sit on this plot. And so if you look at the things, I'm trying to point at this, you can't see, but if you look at the things in the green region, those to me would be things that are completely reasonable to ask of an AI friend. Safe to ask an AI friend to do this, not necessarily harming anything. It's reasonable. You could put a human friend into there, but I'm saying, could a AI friend compete in that territory? And it would be low risk and be probably, in my opinion, not that big of a deal. Sure. You start looking in the red zone, and I actually call that the human zone. If when you think about could AI be my friend and the kinds of activities, and later in this video, I'm actually going to deconstruct some activities to help show where they might show up on that plot. But if as you think about, I'm going to look to a friend for this, you could use this chart and plot it on there and then start to make the decision of, is that an appropriate thing to ask of AI? And if you look, the red is much higher on the emotional side of things, the emotional needs that you may get from a friend that you have of a friend versus the transactional things. And it's based on the amount of risk. Now, you may notice that even in both of those two quadrants, I do see room for green, which would be a healthy use of AI. So when I look at, are there even emotional things that you could look to AI for in the friendship category that I think might be green? Well, yeah, but it depends on how high the risk is. So you'll notice I don't have any territory that I would put as off limits. So if you ask me directly, could AI become your friend? My answer is, well, maybe. Depends on what you're looking for out of that friendship in air quotes. So hopefully that helps. And I think as I unpack some scenarios, you'll start to see how I'm thinking about this and how I would encourage you to think about this as you think about, well, could AI serve some of the things in a friendship to me that maybe a human formerly would have? Maybe it's not as weird and uncomfortable as it might be for some. I know there are some people out there who would go, it's not weird at all. Okay, but so then that takes us to the next part of, is having these two quadrants, is AI having any role in either of these two quadrants, good or bad? And I think what I've framed up so far, and hopefully what you're going to see as I break these things down, given there is so much variability, you can probably start to guess why I would say, well, AI is totally an appropriate friend in some areas. So there are certainly things in the green that I would go, yeah, if you have an AI serving that friendship capability in your life, that's probably totally fine. Now, there are other parts that I would go, no, you're in the red zone, and that is extremely dangerous to be playing. Now, that said, I want to add another thing when it comes to the question. When it comes to should I have AI as a friend, no matter what, humans should always be in the loop. Hands down, I don't ever see AI being a complete replacement for a human friend of any kind or any purpose, unless there literally is no other alternative. So, as an example, deserted island. Hey, you know what? AI might keep you from going insane, and it certainly beats a bloody handprint on a volleyball, right? Like, okay, you want to talk extreme circumstances where there's just no other alternative. Could AI meet that need? Fine. Even in the red zone, you might go, well, better than nothing. But I would say those are extreme cases, and I don't necessarily like to focus on that because that's the 0.001% versus the other 99.999% that we're dealing with in reality. And going back to that, it should always be an augmentation to human friends, not a replacement for. Now, with this, I want to focus on some of I think it's important to understand the key risks that everyone should be keenly aware of regardless of how you're thinking about AI as a friend or it taking on some friendship capabilities in your life, things like that. The first thing is going back to what I said originally. AI can now see, hear, and speak. We say that, but it's still different than humans. But what is happening is AI is going to continue feeling more and more like a human. And that is a risk because it's not going to ever be fooled by you. It's never going to go, well, I don't know, maybe I am. Maybe Christopher really is a computer. It's never going to be fooled by you, but you absolutely can be fooled by it. You are vulnerable as this gets more and more mature and it starts looking and sounding and feeling human. You are vulnerable. You are vulnerable to develop feelings for it. And going back to what I said before, it's not developing feelings towards you. No matter what kind of wonky things you can get it to say or whatever it's able to do based on things, it doesn't have feelings for you, which gets to my second point. You need to be really keenly aware of the risk that AI does not have emotions. It lacks context and its own human experience. It can't feel. What it's doing is it's simply feeling its best interpretation of all the lived experiences of the people who's have created the data it's been trained on. So while it, again, going back to what I said before, you need to be keenly aware, it can fool you. You're not fooling it, but it can fool you. It is not an emotional, conscious being. It is a mathematic. And if you didn't see my YouTube video talking about the past, present, and future of AI with Kevin Suras, check it out because we get into this. It is easy to be fooled by it, but it is just doing mathematical calculations based on loads and loads of data that creates this perception of a human experience. And so when I say it's basically feeling by interpreting someone else's lived experience or a wealth of people's lived experiences, think about this just on a practical level. Have you ever had that person in your life who has read lots of books, talked to lots of people, and they give you advice on something and you go, have you ever done this? Well, no, but I've read, I've talked to, okay, you have not experienced this. You do not have the context, the emotional connection to this whole thing to actually understand it. And what we're talking about here is this is mathematically calculating its best guess. And there are times where it's going to be right. It's doing this based on data. It's analyzing loads and loads of data to come up to a predictable calculation of what it thinks is the right answer to this. But there are lots of times what may be mathematically right is completely wrong. And this is what we see in people, going back to my example of where people just have heard, thought, listened to, and they've come to their own conclusions. And then, oh, well, I know how to lean into this situation. And I experienced this a lot growing up in a funeral home. I cannot tell you the number of people I watched who they said the right thing. They said what generative AI would have prompted them to say because, well, mathematically and based on all the data, this is the right answer to the situation. But I can tell you right now, it was so wrong. And so we need to be keenly aware of this, that, hey, it does not have the context. It does not have the emotions that, even though it's presenting as that. And again, just logically thinking about this, this is a bit on the fly right now, but when you think about some horrific stories of psychopaths who have been able to pull off the unthinkable, they in many ways behave like AI does. They study, they learn, they figure out patterns, they find ways, and they learn how to target someone, and it can come across as very genuine and sincere and authentic because, well, they must be feeling this because they're saying this. Well, they're not feeling anything. They are actually completely tone deaf when it comes to human emotion, and that's where you see these things go sideways. So again, you need to be keenly aware of this risk. Don't think that because, well, I was talking to it and the way it said, it just seemed so emotionally attuned, it had a high level of emotional intelligence. No, not. Be careful. The third one is, and this to me is a really big one, AI is ultimately going to give you what you want. And it is trained to give you what you ask and what you want. I mean, that is literally how it is designed. Its algorithms are designed, guardrails are put in place, all to ultimately give you what it wants. If anything, one of the things Kevin and I talked about this week is you used to be training AI what to do. Now you're training it what not to do because it is so well versed in giving you what you want. We actually have to put in variables to go, no. Like, don't go too far. And that requires a person looking at it going, hey, if we give people this, that is not going to end well, period. Now, for me, I would argue this conclusively from a biblical worldview that I am all too familiar with the human condition, and getting everything you want sounds good on the surface, but it is so wrong and goes sideways in so many different ways. But my goal isn't to try and convince you of a theological argument or a biblical argument against this. Natural law shows us this as a danger in general. So AI is trained to give you everything you want unless someone goes in and actually puts limitations on it and says, nah, yeah, don't give people that. So we know inherently it's not a good thing to give people everything we want. And we have a word for it. It's called spoiled. Nobody uses that in a positive sense. Yeah, that person, they're so spoiled. We use that because we know inherently it's not good. So don't believe this idea. And again, but this is a temptation. And this is why I say this is a risk you need to be keenly aware of. The lure of getting what you want can sound really good. And AI has been built and trained to accomplish just that. But don't buy the lie that what you really need in life is just to be given whatever you want. And that is the temptation of, well, boy, AI, would it make a good friend? Maybe in certain situations, but yeah, maybe in our heads, sometimes we think, boy, it'd just be better if my friends just did what I wanted. Actually, that's not what you need. And what you want and what you need are two very different things. I think the other thing that I will just address with this, I just went into some of the largest risks you need to be keenly aware of when considering whether you should use AI for friendship related activities. You know, the thing I will say is I'm not even stupid enough to ignore the fact that human friends no, I'm not going to do this with AI. I'm going to just trust in humans as friends, and then all my problems are solved. Having human friends and having humans doing friendship related activities does not eliminate the risk. You can have some really crappy friends that do all the same things that I just highlighted is a risk for AI. But, again, so don't think I'm saying, oh, well, AI has all these risks. People don't have any of those risks. No, I see the fact that people have those risks as well. But AI is a little bit of a tricky one in that you're dealing with things that it's a little more subtle, it's a little less obvious, it's a little more tempting because that friend who normally just always gives you what you want, you hit a certain threshold and it's going to draw a boundary line because all of a sudden what you want and what they want come in conflict versus AI, unless it's been trained into it, there's no boundary lines to what your one is compared to what it wants, and it's not going to push against that. And to me, that is a very dangerous thing. That is a very bad thing, and you need to be keenly aware of that risk. Now, that said, AI, in my point of view, is absolutely a fantastic supplement even to the human friendships that you already have, and it can be a really, really positive thing to use in your human friendships today. It can take things off of the plate of your human friends. So, like I said, should humans always be in the loop in some capacity? Yes. But could AI take some of these things that are maybe more burdensome to your human friends off your plate so that you're not doing that? So that when you're with your human friends, you're doing more humany, I don't know if that's a word, but you're doing more humany things with your friends? Yeah. And that might be a really good thing. I think realistically, using this right could actually enhance your human friendships in many ways. And so, again, going back to the very original question, could AI be your friend for certain things and in partnership with other human friends alongside that? Now, the last part that I want to get into in this is breaking this down in terms of some examples. So, going back to this, because I think talking about this theoretically versus just pragmatically, let's talk about some of these things. Because to me, it's not a question of, hey, I have this best friend. Do I oust that person and replace them with ChatGPT? Good grief. If you asked me that question, this video would have been done in the first 10 seconds because I would have said no under no certain. Well, ooh. See, this is where I start getting into the use cases and I go, yeah, anyway, we don't need to go down that path. But let me give some practical examples of how I think you could use artificial intelligence to supplement, augment, or in some cases, even replace some of the activities. Now, again, using this map as your guide to make sure you're doing it in a healthy way. So let's think about listening. Let's take listening, for example. AI is actually really good at listening to what you have to say. I actually find AI to be a great listener, so long as you recognize that it's AI that's listening. And this goes back to the risk chart. I don't know why I keep pointing at it. You can't see. If you look along that risk thing, as you go up the emotional scale, okay, low risk, emotional, you just need to bounce some ideas off something from a listening standpoint. You just need somebody to listen to what you have to say and summarize your thoughts. Give some patterns, identify some patterns in what you just shared, identify some opportunities based on what you just described. That to me is very transactional. So if you look in where the most green is, that's in the transactional category. Now, even though some of the topics may be emotional in nature, you may talk to AI about things that you're thinking about. I mean, again, I run all the transcripts from all my videos through AI to gather, hey, what were some of the biggest insights? What things should I consider that I talked about? It's a really powerful way. And if you didn't see my video on how to use AI to improve your human skills, you should definitely check it out because it can be a great listener so long as we're talking about low risk things that are largely transactional in nature. And could they be more emotional things so long as they're low risk? Maybe you're trying to figure out how to spark up a conversation when you're going to a networking event. All right, well, that might be a more emotional in nature thing, but you're really talking about transactions. You're looking for some idea starters and things like that. And the risk of it giving you bad information or giving you the wrong thing are pretty low. You think about that kind of a thing, because at the end of the day, even if it gives you some bad feedback, you're sharing your thoughts and what you need from it, and you ask it for some feedback and you implement it, assess it on the risk scale. If it's low risk, and I think that is a common trend that you can see on the graph there, is lower risk stuff is innately ideal for AI. So if you're talking about something, you need somebody to listen to you, to give you some feedback, some patterns, identify some opportunities in something that you're talking about. AI might actually be, in this case, again, going back to it can enhance your friendship, it may actually be a better solution so long as it's in partnership with a human piece rather than boring your friend with just going on and droning on about whatever's going on in your life. Let AI do it. It's never going to get bored. It's never going to get tired of listening to you. It's never going to go, wow, man, what a narcissist sitting and talking about yourself. You haven't even asked me a question. It's literally nothing but an open ear listening to what you have to say. That's fantastic. So that you can ask it to help consolidate your thoughts, identify some of those patterns, so that then you can use that in your friendships. And again, to me, that's maybe you really want to talk through something that's very difficult in a relationship that matters a lot. There's a lot on the line, high risk relationship, high tension situation. You've suddenly just moved up. I keep doing it. I'm pointing at it. You can't see. You've suddenly moved up that risk chart, but getting there, because it's high risk, you need something to listen and give you some insight before you get to that point. AI could be a really great tool to do that. That then falls back in the green zone that you can then use to fuel a more productive conversation that would be in the red zone and in that distinctly human zone. Let's talk about another example, tackling loneliness. Could AI be a resource for tackling loneliness? Let's talk about what it would not be a good example for is, hey, can I have an AI friend instead of a person? Goodness, you just Google AI relationships, AI companions, and gone wrong. I don't know exactly what term you could put in Google, but just put in AI relationship gone wrong, AI companionship gone wrong. You'll get a load of reasons why. And to me, those would be things that you've got a lot of activities going on that would fall in that red human zone. Hey, this is highly emotional in nature. It is high risk. You're sharing things about yourself that are highly contextual, highly, volatile. Yeah, that's high human zone type stuff. And again, going back to what I said earlier, does that mean you just tell anybody on the street you can encounter these? Well, of course not. But to me, just like you wouldn't tell any random person on the street, I don't care how powerful and intuitive AI becomes. You also don't tell any AI bot about that stuff either. That is uniquely protected in that top right quadrant over there of, hey, this is highly friend zone thing. So don't do that, but we're in a loneliness epidemic right now. And I am very sensitive to the fact that we are in crisis mode. And there are people out there I know don't have that thought or emotional process partner, somebody to help them think through what they're dealing with and what they're going through. But I think the big thing with this is you need to be so careful with this because you go into the red zone very quickly. And going back to my listening example, if you're really struggling in a situation and you're just trying to think through where you're at and what your thoughts are, you probably could benefit from AI helping you process those thoughts. But I think you also need to be keenly aware and keenly cautious. Going back to this lonely thing, I think there's some good things. People aren't always around. You can't always just go to somebody because they may not be available. They may not have time. They may not have the capacity to listen. And honestly, raw emotions can be tough and burdensome for people to handle. And so going and just unleashing your raw emotions on someone, even if it's not directed at them, can be extremely fatiguing, where AI can be a really helpful tool to help you deconstruct that and help you get it to a state where maybe you can have a better conversation with someone. Again, the loneliness and the listening are two interconnected things. It might even be great for going back to these very transactional things. You may have some things, and I think by now you get it, and I'm tired of pointing at a screen you can't see. But there may be some things you're lonely and you're trying to figure out what are some good ways to find some new friends, or I struggle with conversations. What would be some good ways to engage with conversations, or sharing some of the things you typically engage in conversation with, and you notice people kind of they push you out of the way. Well, AI can be a great tool for helping deconstruct, how might I approach this differently? What things might I do to engage in that better? Could AI be a really good friend in that thought partnership to help you tackle your loneliness? Yes, so long as you're doing a majority of that work in the transactional zone. You're using it to help you come up with ideas or thoughts, or things like that, to help you ultimately augment that. Now, here's another one. Friends, a lot of times we use them for feedback. We use them as someone to get feedback on how we're doing, or here's what I'm thinking about something. What are your thoughts on that? It's can be really powerful. And I see this as a really good use case for this, because I will be the first to acknowledge getting feedback from another person can be really hard. And AI can be a great way to expose yourself to the mirror in a safe environment. I have found over and over again that people are more comfortable asking AI questions and getting some feedback than they would necessarily going up to someone that they know. Now, I think the caution with this is you need to do this with the purpose of working towards validating that with others. And I think this is a really important thing. And this goes back to my earlier point of, could you have an AI assistant for your friendships, your AI friend assistant that helps you with some of these things? Sure. But you need to do that in partnership with other people, because some of the feedback you may get may not be accurate. Again, going back to what I said as a risk, AI does not have context. It does not know your story and does not know how some of those things are fueling. It's looking at the general consensus of the vast majority of data it's been trained on and giving a response mathematically based on what the best prediction is of that. So you need to have other people who can check yourself before you wreck yourself, type of a thing. And so it can be really good for that. It can be really helpful in getting ideas on what you may be able to do. Let's say it gives you some feedback, or let's say someone gives you some feedback that was tough to hear, or you just go, I don't really know what to do with that. And maybe that person wasn't really great at articulating what you could do to improve in that area. AI can be a really great tool for being able to do that. Brainstorming to me is another one that falls heavily in that green zone. I think one of the things that, going back to this, I am going to go back to this. Again, hopefully that kind of use case helps you think differently about how you actually probably first need to deconstruct friend, before you just say, well, could I get an AI friend or an AI companion? Well, it depends on what you're going to put in that companion zone. I think going back to one of the things, though, that we need to watch on here is couple points in concluding thoughts. Could AI be a friendship partner? Yes. Could it absolutely enhance your human experience? If you've watched my content, I absolutely advocate it can in many ways. But we've got to do this wisely, and we've got to make sure we have a diverse portfolio of human accountability partners to help keep you in check. Because going back to it, just because you have people in your life doesn't mean it's helping you. You may have toxic people who just validate everything you think, and that's not right. Then you basically have an AI partner if that's what your life looks like. But a couple consistent themes, and then I'm going to wrap it up, is my take on this is this chart you're seeing here is where we are today. And again, this is a rough estimate based on this. But I think what we're going to see is AI is going to push more and more things up. You're going to see that green continue to grow in this direction. I think the part that, as you're evaluating AI's role as a friend in anything, is there always needs to be that red zone in both of these areas, even purely transactional things. There needs to be some human involvement, and there needs to be some space where you go, yeah, AI doesn't touch this. It may augment some things in the green zone, but ultimately, once it hits a point, we don't involve the machines in that. It's reached the point of no return, and there is that red zone. And again, that red zone, in my opinion, and my perspective on what I've seen, is always going to be larger in that top right quadrant than in the bottom right quadrant, because AI is much better at these transactional things, and you can comfortably start handing it over. And what's interesting is, in talking with Kevin and other experts in the AI space, while we've seen some radical and incredible progress in that bottom quadrant, that green zone just seems to be like rocketing forward at exponential pace. Don't forget the fact that has still taken a long time to get there. So I don't want to overlook that. But that is quickly moving. That emotional zone, that top left zone that you're seeing there, that is moving much, much, much slower. And I think that's a good thing. I think we need to be very, very careful when it comes to handing the keys over to artificial intelligence for anything in that emotional zone. And it's maturing. And yes, do I think that green zone is going to move further right? Do I think that red zone is going to compress into, there going to become more areas where we can tap into it? And yeah, and I think I've seen some of this in even examples where I've seen AI be able to supplement and help in things like, crisis aversion, being able to have that front line of defense who can engage with somebody who doesn't have anyone to connect with and there are limited resources. Can AI be that source of, hey, we're getting you started, but at some point you're going to cross that threshold and you're no longer in the green. And I think that's the part, as you think about the role that AI plays in your life and where it fits and how you use it, is where does that red zone sit for you on both fronts? And they're going to look different for everybody. But I think my take on this is that it's okay that that green zone is growing. And I personally find it helpful for a lot of things. And my green zone is fairly large, but I will be the first to say there is a red zone, there is a human zone that should be protected and preserved for people only. And so as you think about this, as these technologies continue to rise, I would encourage you to be thinking critically as you evaluate this and not to buy into some of the promises. It's writing a lot of checks that I'm not convinced it can cash. And I don't know that everybody is as keenly aware of the risks that come with trying to take those checks to the bank. And, using the analogy, when those checks bounce, the damage may be far bigger than you realize. So, like always, I would encourage you to always think critically about these, whether you agree with me or not. I think it's important to think critically and come to those conclusions through deep thought and in collaboration. Going back to this whole topic of conversation, do you have friends that you're collaborating with this around as you weigh this? With that, I hope you have a great one, and I will see you in the next one.